A new year brings new hopes, new dreams, and new challenges for all of us. It also means new debates in government, make that renewed debates in a lot of cases. That goes for state governments. Iowa state lawmakers get back to work in Des Moines a week from Monday. It'll be the third legislative session for Governor Kim Reynolds. She has some unfinished business from the last session. Reynolds told Iowa Public Radio criminal justice reform remains a priority for her. Part of that is restoring voting rights for convicted felons after prison. A constitutional amendment cleared the state house last year. Reynolds wants the Senate to go along. Then there's the always divisive budget. The Legislative Services Agency indicates the state goes into the year with a $470 million surplus in the general fund. Republicans in control the last 2 years enacted a large-scale tax reform package that cut income taxes for the highest earners and implemented a sales tax for online businesses. The increase in the surplus now has business groups pushing to speed up implementation of the income tax cuts. There is some support for increasing the sales tax to pay for water quality improvements, though Governor Reynolds indicates that would need to be offset by tax cuts in other areas for her to go along. These are some of things that'll be considered in Des Moines. There are also the changes in neighboring states that might pressure lawmakers to take some action. We'll talk about that with a couple of Iowa state lawmakers from the Quad Cities, Democrat Cindy Winkler and Republican Gary Moore. Welcome back to the program, both of you. Great to see you.
Thank
you. Let's start with a big picture look at the budget and the surplus. How much pressure is there to do something with that $470 million? Representative Moore?
Sure. Jim, whenever there's excess money on the table in government, somebody's always got 10 ways to spend it. As the incoming new appropriations chair in the House, I and my caucus want to be sure that we don't just spend money for the sake of spending it. We have some unmet needs. We're going to be taking a look at those programs and perhaps ways that we should invest more dollars into education and health care. We're also going to take a look at maybe returning some of that money to the taxpayers. It's their money to begin with, and so we're going to be looking at a lot of different things, but spending all of it is not one of the options.
We're going to get to some specifics in a minute, but there is that push and pull here, though, for that $470 million.
Absolutely. I think that one of the things that we'd be looking at is adequate funding that would be at least the rate of inflation for our K-12 system. We've been below that for a number of years, and it's cost the students and it's cost the communities. So that would be a very first priority.
Is there pressure to use that $470 million? Is that what the Democrats are going to do, try to apply pressure to use that $470 million or leave some of that surplus in place? There was a $1 billion surplus about 4 years ago, so we're near that.
Right, there was, and with 2.9% suggested growth, I think that adequate funding for schools should fit right in with that, which would be right around 3% supplemental state aid increase. It's important that we keep that going so that our businesses have the educated workforce that they're asking for. The other thing that we need to look at is the issue with childcare. Many of our businesses who want to hire employees aren't able to because of the deficit of childcare providers, and we need to address that. And I think it should be through public-private partnerships. We can't raise the cost, raise the rates of childcare without pricing ourselves out of the market for the workers, and so it will take some work publicly and privately.
Now, I understand you mentioned a moment ago, Representative Moore, about maybe giving some of that back to the taxpayers. Does that mean that the Republicans are going to explore another round of tax cuts? What are we likely to see?
Yes, we're going to take a look at, again, with the surpluses that we currently have and with the projections. Now, I must remind all of us that these are just projections. And we can't spend money that we're not sure is going to be there, but it looks very positive. Our surplus accounts, our savings accounts are full. We're going to have a carryover balance. It looks like next year our budgets are going to be, our income is going to be sufficient. This all came from a lot of hard work of not spending dollars, not growing government. And we think, yes, one of the options ought to be refunding some of those excess dollars to the taxpayers.
Like how so? What types of tax cuts are we looking at more?
Well, probably in income taxes. But again, we're going to take a whole comprehensive look at what are our needs, and I'll go to a couple of the issues Representative Winkler talked about. We are interested in taking a look at child care, how we might be able to do that. A lot of lower middle income people don't take job advancements because their salaries might go up and makes them ineligible for some assistance in the area of child care. With the economy with a minimum of 2.6% unemployment in Iowa, we want everybody to work. And we want people to take advancement and advance themselves and increase their salaries. And so we're going to be taking a look at eliminating what we call the cliff so that some people who are receiving assistance for child care don't take advancement or a new job because they're getting more money, and those might go away. We want to eliminate that cliff. So we're going to look at that. We're going to also look at workforce housing. That's another problem for our employers and our communities, of getting housing for our people. So those are some of the areas we're going to be looking at.
Let's go revisit education a little bit. First of all, Representative, we're going to revisit the tax question issue, because Republicans are going to argue that the tax cuts probably help boost and deliver the surplus again. How are Democrats going to counter that argument?
Well, the tax cuts don't boost. The tax cuts create the capacity, but we have to have the spending in order to support the programs. And so some of the surplus has been gained by underfunding several of our programs. We haven't decided how we're going to fund the children's mental health system. So that is a big ticket item that should be decided ahead of any tax cuts. The other thing that we need to think about is our mental health systems are running in deficit. Although that's property tax, we don't allow them to levy for what the programs cost. And so we need to address that as well.
Representative Moore, when Representative Winkler mentioned a little while ago about the education spending need to be increased, are we going to see a larger increase than we have in recent years?
Well, again, we're going to be taking a look at that, Jim. It's too early to make projections. We spend about 55% of Iowa state budget on education. Right. We gave $90 million of new money to K through 12s. Last year, we're going to continue to invest.
But the percentage increase was less than that the districts wanted.
Yes, right? Absolutely.
So do Republicans have a desire to meet more of what the school systems want?
Well, we're not sure exactly what their wants are. We will fund not what they want, but what we feel is reasonable for us to fund. Again, education is our priority. That's my background. We do fund 55% of our budget in education. We're going to continue to make it a priority. We're going to continue to take a look at it and invest as much money as we feel we comfortably can into education, both K through 12 and higher ed.
What's the satisfactory percentage for Democrats?
3%. That would help curb the cuts that we've continued to see. We've been about 2.1%, and the inflation rate is 3.5 for our school costs, and so they've continued to have to cut more and more over several years, and so we need to right-size that for adequate funding for our schools.
And that's one of the early battles in the budget price fight. Let me get to move on here. We'll be back in a moment, because that brings us to our question of the week. What do you think Iowa State lawmakers should do with the budget surplus? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com. Respond to this post on Facebook at the local 4 News WHBF TV page or on my page.